It was one of those oppressively hot afternoons, the kind that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. I had just come out of the grocery store, trying not to spill my iced tea as I juggled my bags and unlocked my car. That was when I first noticed her, a young woman, no older than her mid-20s, standing by her car with her head bowed. I could hear her daughter, maybe 3 or 4, crying softly from the back seat. I don't usually involve myself in other people's business, but something about that scene, maybe the way the woman's shoulders were slumped, or how her daughter's cries seemed to echo my own sense of helplessness at times, made me hesitate. I put my bags in the trunk and watched for a moment longer, just long enough to see her press her hand to her forehead, obviously overwhelmed. Without much thought, I approached her. "Hey," I said gently, "everything okay?" She looked up, startled, and I could see her face was flushed. The heat, the stress, it was written all over her. She tried to smile but failed. My card got declined," she said, her voice breaking a little. "I don't know what happened, and I have to get these groceries. My daughter's hungry and—" She trailed off, clearly embarrassed. I glanced into the cart. Bread, peanut butter, some juice, a gallon of milk, basic things, nothing extravagant. The little girl in the car had stopped crying now, watching me with wide, curious eyes. She had an innocence about her that made my chest ache. "Listen, why don't you let me help?" I said, reaching into my back pocket for my wallet. "No, I can't let you do that," she began, shaking her head. Her voice had a fragile insistence to it, the kind that comes from being accustomed to fending for oneself. "I want to," I insisted. "Please, just let me do this." After a long pause, she nodded, her eyes glistening. I handed her a couple of 20s, enough to cover the groceries and maybe a little extra. She looked down at the bills in her hand, and her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, she looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "It's John," I said, smiling at her. "You don't have to pay me back or anything. Just take care of yourself, okay?" "I will," she said, swallowing hard. "I'm Sarah, and this little one is Lily." Lily gave a shy wave from the car, and I waved back. It felt good. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it felt right. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but feel like maybe, just for a moment, I'd made a tiny difference in someone's life. I guess I should back up a little. I've always believed in small acts of kindness, even though my own life hasn't been without its own struggles. Growing up, I didn't have the most stable household. My father was a truck driver who was always on the road, and my mother juggled multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. I remember how some days dinner was just a couple of slices of bread with peanut butter, and how the heat would get cut off in the middle of January when bills fell behind. My mother's mantra, however, was always, "Help if you can. The world isn't as bad when people are good." I suppose that's why I helped Sarah that day. It wasn't just about her immediate need, but a reflection of what my mother had always believed. I've carried her words in my heart, and even though I didn't have much myself, I tried to live by them. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone else is just be there when things are falling apart. I'd lived a pretty ordinary life up until that point. I worked as an assistant manager at a local hardware store. It wasn't exactly a dream job, but it paid the bills, and it allowed me to rent a small one-bedroom apartment downtown. I liked the people I worked with, and the routine brought me a sense of stability I'd lacked as a kid. Sure, I had bigger dreams at some point, to travel, to do something meaningful, but somewhere along the way, I settled into the comfort of routine, like a lot of people do. But then, everything changed when my son was born. It was almost a year to the day after I helped Sarah that my ex-girlfriend Emily gave birth to our son, David. Emily and I weren't together anymore by then. We'd had a complicated relationship, 2 people who were good for a while, then not so much. When she told me she was pregnant, we both tried to make it work, but the arguments and our different ideas about the future eventually drove us apart. Despite everything, I wanted to be part of my son's life. When David was born, it was as if something clicked into place inside of me that I hadn't realized was missing. I remember holding him for the first time, his small hand curling around my finger, and feeling a rush of emotions: love, protectiveness, and even fear. I was terrified I'd mess things up, that I wouldn't know how to be a good dad, but I was determined to try. Emily and I worked out a co-parenting schedule, and though it wasn't easy, we managed. I found myself balancing work, weekend visits, and those sleepless nights when David was teething. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were times when it felt like the weight of everything was pressing down on me. But through it all, I wanted David to have what I had sometimes missed growing up, someone who showed up no matter what. In the middle of all of this, I'd almost forgotten about Sarah and her daughter. Life was busy, and between work and raising David, there wasn't much time for anything else. But the memory of that sweltering day in the grocery store parking lot lingered, occasionally popping up in my mind when I was feeling overwhelmed. It reminded me that there were other people out there, struggling just as much as I was, and that maybe, just maybe, we were all in this together. The years rolled by, as they tend to do, and the memory of that hot afternoon faded. I got caught up in my own problems, work stress, the responsibilities of fatherhood, my aging mother. Life has a way of piling things on until all the good deeds of the past are just blurry recollections. That afternoon became just another one of those distant memories I didn't revisit often. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. It started like any other day. I got up, had my coffee, and went to work. I had a meeting at noon, so I decided to leave the office a little early to grab lunch from a place across town. I never made it there. It happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, I was waiting at a red light, tapping my fingers against the steering wheel, and the next, I heard tires screeching. I remember glancing into my rearview mirror just in time to see a truck barreling towards me. The impact was like nothing I'd ever felt, a massive jolt that seemed to rattle my bones, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the first thing I heard. My body felt heavy, my head foggy. I could barely move without every muscle screaming in protest. "Hey there, how are you feeling?" a soft voice asked. I blinked, trying to focus my eyes, and saw a young nurse standing by my bed. She was smiling at me, her eyes warm, but there was something familiar about her. I squinted, my mind still sluggish from whatever meds they'd given me. Do I know you?" I asked, my voice raspy. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Well, kind of. I'm Lily. You probably don't remember, but when I was little, you helped my mom with groceries." My heart skipped a beat. Lily? The little girl in the back seat all those years ago? I couldn't believe it. I opened my mouth to say something, but she just smiled, as if she could see the surprise and confusion written across my face. "You helped us out when we really needed it," she continued, adjusting the blanket that had slipped off my arm. "And now it's my turn to help you." I could barely comprehend what she was saying, but in that moment, something clicked. Life has a funny way of circling back, doesn't it? Here I was, broken and vulnerable, and somehow this young woman was standing in front of me, a girl I'd helped when she and her mother were at their lowest. It felt surreal. "You're a nurse?" I asked, still trying to piece everything together. She nodded. "I just finished nursing school last year. I work here now." I swallowed hard, emotion welling in my chest. "Your mom must be so proud." A shadow crossed her face, and her smile faltered. "My mom, she passed away last year. It's been hard, but I know she'd be happy that I'm doing something meaningful." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her how sorry I was, that I remembered her mother so clearly, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, blinking back tears. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed louder suddenly, filling the silence between us. Lily checked on me regularly throughout my stay at the hospital, and over the next few weeks, we talked a lot. She told me stories about her mom, how, despite all the challenges, Sarah had always found a way to make things work, to keep a smile on her face for her daughter. Lily spoke of her mother's strength and how that day in the parking lot, when I'd helped them, had been a turning point. It hadn't fixed everything, of course, but it had given her mom a little hope when she'd needed it the most. She'd needed it. "That day," Lily said once as she sat by my bed, "Mom told me that sometimes when things are really hard, people show up to remind you that the world isn't all bad. You did that for her, and when she got sick, I decided I wanted to be that kind of person for others. I guess you inspired me too." I was floored. It's strange how a seemingly small act of kindness can echo through someone's life, ripple by ripple, changing things in ways we never intended or imagined. I'd handed a young mother a couple of 20s, hoping it would make her day a little easier. And here I was, years later, reaping the kindness I'd sown. When I was discharged from the hospital, I knew I owed my life not just to the doctors and surgeons, but also to Lily. She'd been there, every step of the way, making sure I was comfortable, holding my hand when the pain got too intense, and reminding me that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just her care that helped me heal. It was the warmth, the kindness she showed, the kind that comes from a heart that's known hardship but hasn't let it harden. A few months after I was out of the hospital, I reached out to her. I wanted to do something for her, something to show my gratitude. We met up at a cafe, and I handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked, looking at it curiously. "Just open it," I said, smiling. Inside was a letter I'd written, explaining how much her kindness had meant to me, how much I admired her for becoming the kind of person who gives so much to others. And there was also a check, a small scholarship I'd set up in her mother's name. I knew that Sarah had always wanted Lily to pursue her dreams, and I wanted to help make that happen. Lily looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "John, I can't accept this," she said, her voice trembling. "Please," I said. "You helped me when I needed it the most, and I want to do this for your mom too. I know she's looking down and smiling at you." She wiped her eyes, trying to smile through the tears. "Thank you," she whispered. This means more to me than you'll ever know." Life is full of twists and turns, unexpected moments that connect us in ways we can't foresee. We move through our days, doing what we can, and sometimes we forget that even the smallest acts of kindness can plant seeds that grow far beyond what we'll ever witness. The day I helped Sarah with her groceries, I had no idea it would lead to this, that her daughter would one day be the one to pull me back from the brink, to remind me that goodness always finds its way back to us. Maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe we're all just here, trying to make it through, hoping that our small acts of kindness will ripple outward and find their way back to us in the moments we need them most. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. I don't know what the future holds for me, or for Lily, but I do know one thing: I'll keep paying it forward, because at the end of the day, we're all just waiting at that red light, hoping that someone, somewhere, will see us and choose to help. And maybe we'll be lucky enough to be that person for someone else too. The connection between us, the unexpected twists that link our stories, remind me every day that even the smallest gestures matter, and that maybe, if we're really lucky, they can save a life.